Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and as always, we are here bringing you some hands that we have played poorly. We're going to talk through them. We're going to see how we maybe could have played them better. We're going to be wrong about it. It's going to be a grand old time.
Did you say we're going to be calm about it?
So we're going to be wrong about it.
Oh, I think you said calm, and I was like, listen, if you listen to these first couple hands, you will no longer be calm.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I have one of my biggest punts ever, I think. A true masterful punt lined
Awesome.
up for us.
I have a really
cap off the show at the end here. So
fantastic. Well, I have a hand that I think is actually really interesting. It's a hand that I think I played in kind of a non-standard way to how I've been playing, and I'm curious if you think it was kind of a bad play or if it kind of just didn't work out. Spoiler alert, slightly, but.
yeah, these are hands we didn't play well for clarity for the viewers.
as always. So happy to hop right into it. And we are playing in this hand. This is going to be a 1-3 game from Encore, Boston Harbor. We're going to be $550 effective. It's a 1-3 game with a $500 cap. So stacks often get quite deep in this game. But it's quite interesting. We talk about stack depth's a reasonable amount and how the 500 cap here is not that dissimilar from the 2-5 that you play with the $500 cap. Absolutely. But also like the standard open in this 1-3 game is usually something in the neighborhood of $15, which is not unlike the standard open at some 2-5 games we've played. So it really does. I don't know. It's interesting where blinds only matter so much as really only so much as the open size matters.
No, exactly. I mean, the standard open at Best Bet Orange Park, which has a $500 cap on the 2-5 game where I usually play, standard open is $15. Some tables will do 20, but a lot of tables will do 15. So in a lot of ways, our games are the same game, just with slightly different nomenclature. But
yeah. So well, anyway, so in this hand, we've got the straddle on. The straddle's on periodically in this game, and I guess that's one way they can differ pretty significantly. Is when the straddle's on to 6, then the open in the 1-3 game is usually to 20, and I'm sure in the 2-5 game when the straddle's on to 10, it does get significantly shallower because then you'd think the standard open's probably in the $30 range.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and the straddler is going to be the main villain in this hand. The straddler is what I would call a lag. But it's kind of interesting. He's one of these players who is not super aggressive pre-flop, but he has just bluffed the pants off people post-flop in like so many scenarios. And
just to clarify for listeners who don't know, a lag stands for loose aggressive. So a player who is very aggressive and plays a lot more hands than he should be playing.
Right, like he's limp calling a lot of hands, and then he's actually kind of doing what I always think people do, which is like, if they're playing this many hands, then they have to be bluffing with some of them. Well, he's bluffing with, like, most of them. Nice. Like, at one point he, like, bluffed a, monotone board and proudly showed 10-5 suited, not of that suit. For, like, bottom pair with no kicker.
And these are great players to play against because you can, just let them blast off into you when you make a hand. Mm-hmm. And you also get to overfold a lot of marginal flop hands where you might otherwise call... float certain players. You can a lot of times just overfold flops.
Yeah, because the barrels are going to come on the turn. The barrels are going to come on the river, and it also means that their ranges are often very capped when they check back, just because they are betting so many made hands and bluffs.
Yeah, actually, I saw a really interesting article a while ago about how it is profitable to call with anything other than bottom pair. It is profitable to call 3 streets against a lag. So
yeah,
anything better than bottom pair, you're good. You're golden. Just call.
So in this hand, it's going to start as so many do with 3 limps from middle position players. From the field, it's like low jack, hijack, and cutoff, or maybe middle position, low jack, hijack. It's not super important, which we'll see as I look down in the big blind at red jacks.
Nice.
Which, of course, we're going to raise up. My typical sizing here is 20 plus 5 for each limp, so I make it 35.
I like it. It's good.
And, obviously that's not a perfect system, because if you're supposed to do a multiple, we're going up by 5, not 6. But I'm kind of in your camp, and I know we've talked about it before, that's like, why go through the trouble of making it 12 versus 15 or some such when really you're just gonna wind the value you may gain from making it $1 extra, you might lose an hourly while the dealer makes change for 4 players.
Exactly.
So the straddler now calls.
Okay.
And
which is actually maybe somewhat strong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think from this, the straddle, as I said, is the main villain in this hand. He's the loose aggressive player. He's calling, like I said, a lot pre-flop, so I'm not too worried. At one point, I straddled, he put on the blind 12, all sorts of fun stuff going on. So he calls and the limpers fold.
Okay.
So we've got
basically about 80 something in the pot, heads up out of position.
Yep, we'll call it 85 in the pot. That means we've got about 515 behind, and we're off to a flop, which is not the greatest flop in the world. It's not the worst flop in the world either. It's 9-5-3, all spades. So we flop an overpair. We do not have a spade, so no sort of blockers or equity to pick up here. But we have an overpair, and against this guy's range, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, you do have an overpair, and you're also less than 100 big blinds effective with the straddle. So, you don't have to be too worried. Getting felted here isn't the end of the world if he does have a flush. But, there's probably a lot here you can get value from. I think you can check here from out of position a decent amount and then check raise. I think you can also bet. I think both are fine. I think check calling is my least favorite option, honestly. But I actually don't even think that can be that bad. I mean, you got an overpair here versus a wild guy. I mean, everything's going to be plus EV. So,
yes, I mean, I definitely agree, and I kind of think this should mostly be, like you said, kind of a cross between checking and betting. Probably want to be check raising a lot, especially without a spade, because it means he can have a lot of one spade combos. I mean, this guy could probably be betting out with Jack 10 offsuit with the Jack of spades, or something like that. That would not surprise me. So not having the spade is probably pretty good. Although if he plays so many suited hands, then it also unblocks a lot of spade combos. But I just
want to make a point about that. It's 9-6-3,
9-5-3,
9-5-3. That blocks a lot of his spade hands, while it unblocks a lot of yours, because you're going to have a lot more suited Broadway type spade hands, and he's going to have a lot more of those 6x, 9x spades. 9-8 of spades, 6-7 of spades, 6-5 of spades, 4-3 of spades, whatever. Yep. And those are all blocked. So you actually have more flushes than he does here.
Yep. Although, again, I haven't really seen this guy get too aggressive pre-flop, so it is possible that, he's calling a lot of suited Broadways as well. But point taken, and we definitely think we should definitely have more suited aces.
I agree he can have suited Broadways, but you don't have the, junky suited hands that he does. So your flushes are a lot less blocked than his.
But anyway, I decided to bet here. I think betting small is the way to go on a monotone board. So I make it 25 into 80-85.
Seems fine. Yeah, I don't think there can be anything wrong with betting here. I would be against this type of player, I would be prepared to stack off as long as a fourth spade doesn't come out. So I really think I kind of just want to get the money in. So however you think you can best accomplish that.
Yep. So I bet 25. He calls pretty quickly. So we've got 135 in the pot at this point and a bit under 500 behind.
And now when he just calls here, I mean, he doesn't have a flush, right? Because you said he's a very aggressive player.
One would think. So the turn is now going to come the best card in the deck we could ever hope to see, which is, of course, the Jack of Clubs.
Very nice.
So we turn top set and does not affect the spadeness of the board. And here's where I decide to get a little bit tricky and check.
I like it. Actually, I really like this for a lot of reasons. I think it's really important to have traps in your turn checking range. It's very easy to have an accidentally capped turn checking range from out of position when you're often wanting to barrel when you pick up equity and things like that. And then when you don't barrel, a lot of times you just almost always have nothing or a marginal made hand. So having some traps in your turn checking range is extremely important. An overcard coming out versus a wild aggressive player seems like a great time to trap your nutted hand. So yeah, I love the check.
And also, I also thought, I don't really need as much protection anymore from like random overcards like an ace or a king if he's got those types of hands. And yeah, I actually saw I was thinking of this hand when I read your tweet earlier that was like, how does one protect like your turn checking range? And I was like, well, turn top set is a great one especially because people, you barrel that card a lot, and so when you check it, because you do want to check some give ups, then that kind of fits well in a trap. And of course, it's also worth noting that against many live players with a lot more passive play style, you can play unbalanced and give up certain turns because you don't want to trap because they're just not going to bluff turns.
Absolutely, yeah. If you know for a fact that your opponent, if you have some nuttish hands on the turn and you know for a fact your opponent is just going to check back most of the times, you don't need to worry about balancing yourself out. But yeah, okay, fair enough.
And the villain checks back.
Oh, he checks back. Okay.
The villain checks back, so I kind of think, well, I mean, he probably has nothing here. I don't know, maybe he's got like a one pair hand, that he kind of wants to pot control with. That said, I have seen this villain, as I said, turn pairs into bluffs. Or I guess maybe not bluffs, but probably bluffs. I check, he checks back, and the river is going to roll off a pretty innocuous 4 of diamonds.
Okay, so the
final board I can read off here: 9 of spades, 5 of spades, 3 of spades was the flop. The turn came the jack of clubs, the river 4 of diamonds. We are holding jack of diamonds, jack of hearts. So we turned top set. There are, of course, 3 spades on the board. The 4 of diamonds does complete some gut shot straight draws as well.
Yeah. Well, it completes, of course, ace deuce, and it completes also 7-8.
6-7.
6-7, I'm sorry. Yeah, 6-7, yep. Okay. Well, I mean, again, I it's hard to know what you would do here from a balance standpoint. First, I guess that would be my first question, because putting aside villain's tendencies, what are you doing here if you're just trying to make a balanced play?
I don't know. It's pretty interesting. I kind of don't hate. I don't really know what I'd do here from a balanced perspective. I mean, maybe we can overbet this spot because the villain really caps his range a lot more by just calling the flop and then checking back the turn, which means he should really never have a flush. And if he doesn't really have a flush, then there really shouldn't be any hands that are beating us at this point.
Yeah. I think that's fair. You can have. I mean, you can have some flushes probably that. I mean, I don't know. It's a little odd of a line to check turn with a flush, but it's certainly possible.
Villain can probably have some nut flushes, maybe. If he, especially live. I don't know about it from a balanced perspective. I don't know how often you're supposed to check back flushes.
I think one thing that's interesting is it's always really hard for the out of position player to have an extreme nut advantage, because a lot of times villain in position players cap their range when they check back the turn, but then their range on the river, if the river changes the board at all, then they're uncapped again. Mm-hmm. So so I think it's interesting to think whether you have a real big nut advantage on this board. I think knowing if your opponent believes that you are capable of trapping turn, then I would say you do. But if your opponent doesn't think so, if your opponent doesn't think you can really cap that you would ever have a nuttish hand here, then in some ways you don't have an advantage, which maybe is something we can capitalize on. And maybe he just won't believe you if you bet really large. So.
Well, and it's interesting. Another thing, and what I considered, and actually what I wound up doing or trying to do, and we'll get to that, what actually happens on the river in a sec. But I wonder if it's also okay from a balanced perspective to do sort of the exploitative. Basically, if the play that I made intending to be exploitative wound up swinging back, maybe it is what we're supposed to do, which is kind of check raise small, because villain has a lot of misses, but some of those misses might also be bottom pair hands that he may not think is good and decide to turn into a bluff. And our line looks pretty weird if we check raise a river here.
I mean, you have to think to check raise, you have to be able to be called.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's any worse hand that will call a check raise.
I think there are. I think all sorts. I think there are definitely 2 pair type hands. Villain definitely could have 5-4, 3-4.
But that's it. Like, you mean rivered 2-pair?
Yeah.
But like that's a pretty narrow part of his range. Like if you think about, especially it's especially a pretty narrow part even when you're thinking about like his bet river range. I mean, like weak 2-pair, like yeah, okay, that's some of it, but like I think most of his river betting range, obviously there would be some flushes that he slow played, possibly straights.
And what about sets?
What sets is he, like 4s exactly?
Do you think Villain ever has 5s or 3s here? That he doesn't, some for whatever reason, plays a little bit, tries to pot control basically against the flush.
Maybe if it was an old man.
Yeah. Yeah, reasonable.
Yeah, honestly, I've seen it for sure, but I don't think so, especially against this villain type. So I don't think he has sets. Like, he's probably betting river with a lot of bluffs,
right, which
aren't going to call it a check raise. And then he's got a lot of marginal made hands that maybe he would be betting thinly for value and then just fold. So
yeah, I think that's
like a bet here, I think. And I don't really think I like an over bet either. I think I like maybe pot. I think first of all, you can split your river size. I think you can have a block sizing here on this particular river, but I also think you can have a large size. I think the appropriate sizing to take with a large size, the appropriate hands to take with a large size would be obviously your these nutted hands, and I think that the sizing is probably pot. I don't know that it's an overbet.
Yeah, and what do you think about? So it sounds like you're, if we're gonna check, and I think I do agree with your reasoning that if we check, then his betting hands are basically going to be, yes, he's got a lot of bluffs or like marginal made hands that he's turning into bluffs. Those hands are not calling a check raise. He has a very slim segment of worse value that might call a small check raise. And then he's also got, obviously, plenty of better value. So, if we're going to check, then probably check calling makes the most sense. And maybe, against this opponent, I mean, from a balanced perspective, probably do agree with betting on the larger side. Against this opponent, I probably do like check calling because I think we're more likely, that's just the way we're going to make the most money, is this particular opponent is going to be betting with enough hands versus sort of a standard live opponent where would definitely be betting here all day.
Yeah, I do think against this villain type, I do like the idea of just a check call strategy. Although, given the action so far, where he just called your flop bet and then checked back the turn, it seems like he's not that interested in this pot. So I do worry about, is he actually going to bluff much?
Yeah, but I think if he's not that interested. I think if he's not that interested in the pot, he is more likely to bluff than he is to call like a large bet.
That's fair. No, you're right. So I think against this villain type, you can check. I think from a balanced perspective, I like to bet pot. I like to bet pot because our opponent's range is very mid-heavy. We have a lot of medium-strength hands, very few strong, weak hands, not that much junk. So I think we just want to put those medium-strength hands in a tough spot and bet better on pot.
And do you think we're bet folding or bet calling with this hand?
If you're betting pot, I think it's...
It would be pretty gross if we bet pot and got jammed on. I guess that's not to say that it's wrong. It's just thinking about it. It might have to be a fold without a spade, like.
Yeah, well, like, what are you then bet calling if it's not this?
Well, I mean, obviously flushes. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I think this could be a bet fold. That seems fine.
Like we should have enough flushes theoretically.
Sure.
Hopefully.
So, okay.
I mean, I guess we'd have to check turn, and maybe we do just check up turn a lot, with made hands. But anyway, I do decide. Moving on, I do decide to check. Villain bets 100, which is fairly large into the 135. And I think you're probably right that, we don't get called by enough worse hands if we raise. I kind of decide, I've seen this guy turn like pairs into bluffs. This is kind of a weird line, and maybe he just like won't believe me if I just like click it back. I just like make a super small raise.
Interesting. I actually like that. I hadn't thought about like just a tiny raise, but
yeah, okay. I wasn't thinking about check jamming. I think that definitely isolates us against only the strongest parts of his range. But like, I wound up raising to I think 215.
I like that line. It's interesting. I still think I prefer betting, but well, that's
my question. Is like, do you think this is too thin against this type of opponent? Because even though he is a lag, maybe that means that his range is so bluff heavy. I guess my hope was that like some of those bluffs would be like contain a 9 or a 5, and he might like just kind of get curious and call.
But you do have to think though, like betting 100 into 135 probably is what you would consider a polarizing bet, right?
Right.
So if you look at the villain's range, it's mostly junk and then made hands, and all the made hands beat you.
Yeah.
So I don't really like a raise. I don't.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because especially with the bigger sizing. And I kind of went back and forth, but I was like, well, I feel like I should probably try and eke out some more value against whatever hands we're beating. But he snap calls, which is, of course, never a good sign. And when I show my hand, he shows ace deuce of hearts.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful.
So, yes, he rivered the straight and, absolutely made the max from me.
Yeah. Ugh. That's so lame. Yeah.
I know, and I was definitely, it took me a second. I was like, oh man, like,
And he wouldn't have got, if you bet turn, he's totally folding too. See?
Yeah, but I don't want him to fold turn. I want him to miss and bet.
Balance play is wrong. You would have won the hand if you hadn't checked turn.
You know, I do think that checking turn and river probably does make the most sense against this opponent, but the river then probably becomes a check call because like he should have a lot of hands that miss, and I do think that if the river were, an offsuit, whatever, like, anything, he is almost certainly, like, barreling ace deuce of hearts.
Sure.
On the river.
I also, by the way, think you can maybe check raise a small river bet, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's probably fair as well. Of course, here, I definitely agree. I think it makes way more sense to call a river. Rather than trying to eke out the value against better hands. So, yeah. Lost a little bit extra, but overall, I mean, I do think that I think we've, betting makes a lot of sense, and especially against the live population, but I think if you're against someone aggressive, try and exploit them, and it's not something I do very often, and I definitely struggle against lags and figuring out how best to play against that more aggressive play style, but this is how we end up doing it.
Yeah, doing a lot of check raising is a good strategy against lags, too.
Yeah, well, except here.
Well, not on the river. I mean, in earlier streets.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, fair enough.
Well, let's move on.
Yeah, by the way, before we move on, ladies, gentlemen, if you're enjoying this content, consider pressing the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. You might find that you'll get some more garbage poker play in your feed. All right, so this next hand I have is from our online home game. And we're gonna be $86 effective in this hand.
And is this a 25-50 game?
No, this is actually a 25-25-25 game. So the small blind and big blind are both 25 cents, and then everybody puts in a 25-cent ante. It's not a big blind ante, so there's a 9-handed game. So that does mean that there's 275 of dead money in the pot.
Right.
This is a fun game. This is a fun setup.
And we're 86 effective. So because it's 9-handed, there's 275 effective. So it almost is playing like a 1-2. Maybe. What's the standard open in this game?
The standard open in this game was around $2, give or take.
That's a little small.
Right? I don't think so. The way people adjust to antes versus blinds is rather odd. But yeah, I don't pretend to understand really anti-math very well. But
okay.
Anyway, the standard open was around $2. Some were opening a little bit. So in this hand, we are in the low jack position. And the under the gun player, who is going to be the main villain, opens up the pot to 225.
Okay.
And I don't have a ton of reads on this villain. I've never played with them before. I have seen them play a bit, and I have determined that they are capable of aggression, but that's about all I know.
Okay. So either a lag or a more tight aggressive player who might be relatively solid.
Yeah, I don't know. That's it. I just know that I've seen them be aggressive. So they open it up under the gun, and I am in, like I said, the low jack, and we make it. So they open to 225, and we make it 675 with ace of spades, queen of spades.
Okay.
Fairly standard here. The next to act, so that would be the hijack, cold calls. The hijack is a lag. That is not the main villain, though. And the original Razor also calls.
Wow. Okay, so a lot of action in this game.
Yeah. So we're looking at a pretty chunky pot already.
Yeah, we are.
So
it's like 22-ish?
Yeah, about that. So the flop rolls off Jack of Diamonds, 4 of Diamonds, 6 of Clubs.
Jack of Diamonds, 6 of Clubs, 4 of Diamonds. So Jack 6-4, there's a diamond flush draw, no spades on the board. We've got 2 overs and pretty much nothing else.
Yeah, we whiff. So the under the gun player checks in flow. We check as well, and the hijack checks back.
The hijack checks as well?
Yes.
Perfect. So it checks around. Well,
Yeah,
that's exactly what you want to see on a flop where you miss.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think there's any merit at all in betting here, really.
No. I mean, we don't want to really range bet here multi-way, and ace queen is like way too strong to bluff and way too weak to value bet.
Yeah. So, and by the way, that player behind me checking tells me he doesn't have anything because this is a like maximum lag. So
perfect.
He definitely does not have anything. So the turn now rolls off the ace of diamonds.
Okay, well, it's a little bit scary. Flush completes, but we, of course, make top pair with a good kicker.
Yeah, we make top pair. We certainly have the best one pair hand. There shouldn't be any ace king here. The laggy player certainly would have 4-bet the ace king, and the under the gun player would be heavily incentivized to 4-bet their ace kings given the cold call in the middle. So I really don't think we need to be concerned about ace king here.
Yep.
But of course, there's a flush out there. There's some possible 2 pairs like ace 4, ace 6, probably some ace jack from under the guns.
Yep, absolutely.
Under the gun does check, which I like to see. I think that this represents, some ace x, some jack x, and then not a ton of thick value. Maybe some flushes looking to check raise, certainly, maybe some ace jack. But I think for the most part, checking here is good news for me. I think I should bet.
Yeah, I think betting makes sense here.
I choose to bet 3/4 pot, bet $17. What do you think about that?
I think that's a little big into 2 players. That's what I think. I mean, I think after the flop checks, it's a fairly, I don't know, it is a fairly thin value bet because I don't know that we're going to get 2 streets of value a whole lot. Especially if we take a large sizing here, I think it's tough to get value from worse hands on the river. A lot, I don't know. What are we trying to, if you kind of think forward to the river, this bet, if we bet 17 and get called by under the gun only, because it seems, we've largely discounted the hijack, it seems. We'll basically have a pot size bet left on the river, but, are we going to get called by enough worse hands if we, shove pot on a river brick? I don't know, or what are we trying to get value from there? Because, he shouldn't have all that many worse ace X in his range at this point.
Yeah, from raising under the gun. That's true. Certainly ace 10 is possible. But you're right, actually, that there's not a ton to continue to get value from the river. Whereas if we take maybe a smaller sizing here on the turn, and we can maybe, on brick rivers, we can, bet fold for value.
Yeah, because I do think that some hands he can have some maybe some suited wheel aces that he decided he was priced in to call with. Or not even necessarily wheel aces, but random suited ace, kind of crappy suited aces.
Yeah.
Because some wheel aces might 4-bet occasionally, but and I think those hands, if we kind of go pot into two opponents, pot again, can find a fold on the river because he probably does have enough better hands to continue with once the flush completes. Whereas if we go bet small, he probably just has to shrug call.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously the advantages of kind of betting on the large side is, if he does have a draw, then we can kind of bet here and possibly check some rivers and kind of get all the value here.
Yeah, I do think there's definitely some combo draws here. There's king queen offsuit is a hand he shouldn't have, but most players will show up with here, king queen offsuit with a diamond.
Mm-hmm.
But that might also be played as a check jam here, and we don't love getting check jammed here, and we're also blocking that hand.
Yeah.
I mean, King 10, no diamond. It's like King 10 suited. That could also check jam here, but like in terms of draws, I'm trying to think like what are the draws that could have enough equity to just call. It's like
not a lot. Like King Jack off with the King of Diamonds. Maybe.
Well, that's not a draw. Oh, I'm sorry, with the King of Diamonds. Yeah.
Like that hand's probably gonna fold river if we bet. Especially to sort of a large sizing, but that is a hand that maybe is.
Yeah, so I actually, I don't like my bet here. I think you're right. So I think a smaller bet is in order to maybe something like 1/3.
Yeah, and it is multi-way is the other thing. I know we've kind of discounted hijack, but even if we've discounted hijack, a large bet into multiple people does look very strong. And we do only have one pair, and I think it will be tough to get stacks in against a worse hand.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a pretty big mistake here for me. But anyway, this player does call.
So we bet 17 into 22. The hijack folds right away, I assume, and the under the gun player calls.
Yep. So.
Okay, so we go up to 56 in the pot, and there's basically like 63 behind-ish.
Yeah, it was what it was there was like 58 and there was 61 behind, but I'm
so
kind
close
of
to a pot size bet behind.
I've been rounding off the cents to make our lives easier here. So. So the river rolls off the King of Spades.
Okay.
Which, obviously, I don't love. Some very logical two pairs get there.
It's kind of. It's mostly just the King Jack. Right?
Yes, that's right. King Jack gets there. Obviously, Queen 10 comes in if he has that. So
yeah, but this is where it's interesting, right? Like I actually don't think that this card changes a whole lot because like even a King Jack without a diamond, like King Jack suited, might fold the turn to like such a big bet.
Interesting.
Like I guess I don't know. Like we'd have to think through his range construction a bit more of like what hands. And it's tough to know what hands he's like betting and then calling a 3-bet plus a flat. Because, I don't know. I like King Jack suited or King Jack suited, probably. People love their suited broadways. But it's, King Jack, like, without a diamond is gonna, I don't know, it's gonna be tough to call a pot size bet. Or, like, a pretty large bet.
Yeah, I also, like, King Jack isn't a great hand to call on the turn anyway, because you're blocking some of the hands you hope I have. Mm-hmm. Like Queen 10.
King Jack,
King 10 rather. Sorry, Queen 10 I can't have, but you're hoping I would have like King 10 on the turn, maybe.
But like, and in the same vein, like Queen 10 without a diamond, you'd think is a snap fold. Even Queen 10 with a diamond is like, it's not a nutted draw, and it's like you're basically drawing to a gutter or like a non-nutted diamond, which is a questionable call with only a pot size bet behind. And
and you shouldn't really have Queen 10 like offsuit here.
Yeah, right. I totally agree. So that being said, I don't think it changed. That my main point being, I don't think it changes all that much. The only thing that I would envision it changing is if he does have one of those King Jack offsuit combos with the King of Diamonds. Mm-hmm. But that also, he would also then have to call pre-flop with King Jack offsuit and a 3-bet and a flat out of position to both players, which is possible in these games for sure.
I think he can have King Jack, any King Jack. I don't think he needs to have a diamond on the turn to have King Jack. I think you should call King Jack on the turn.
That's probably fair.
Yeah. So, anyway, he jams. He just lead jams.
Wow.
Yep. And I'm in the blender. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy being donk jammed on, as we've discussed many times. Usually the nuts. Much more so from live players, to be fair. Online players can mix it up a little bit more. But still not a very common play as a donk jam for pot.
Well, I know you like to do this. So, let's kind of think through your range, right? Because when we check back flop multi-way, I don't know that we're going to be doing a whole lot, or not check back, but check in the middle. I don't know if we're going to be, are we going to be doing that a lot with our, like, nutted hands and, like, good draws? Like, I would think not.
I probably am checking most of my hands, I think, here, actually.
Okay.
Especially given the propensity of the player behind me.
Okay.
to just bet everything. So I think I'm doing a lot of checking. I don't know. Like I must have some bets, but I don't know. I might not. I might just check range, honestly.
And I think that's okay, especially given the stack depth, because it seems like, obviously, if you kind of make 2 chunky bets on the turn and river, then you're there. You were able to get stacks in, assuming that hijack also had kind of a comparable stack or a shorter stack, or that you were the effective
hijack
stack.
covered us both.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, then then it seems like we're kind of ace queen without a diamond is probably slipping down in our range.
Sure. I mean, our range doesn't change from pre-flop to through the flop, and then we get on the turn. It's like, well, what hands are we betting on the turn for this sizing? Like a lot of different, like probably not our weak ace X, like our ace 5, ace 3. I'd probably still check those, or I may bet them, but not for the sizing. So I might not bet them at all. I don't know, but so I probably don't have a ton of those. Like I probably don't have a ton of weak ace X. I definitely have some flushes. Like king queen of diamonds, queen 10 of diamonds, 10 9 of diamonds, 8 7 of diamonds, 9 8 of diamonds. Probably 6 5. I mean 6 5. Sure, why the heck not? Like 7 6. Yeah, I can have lots of flushes.
Yeah.
Probably sets of jacks, sets of aces. Some ace. I do have ace 10 too. I would probably play ace 10 the same way. I have some ace jack, 2 pairs.
Yeah, and obviously also when we're thinking about ace queen and even ace 10, we do. I think having a diamond is pretty important. Like in this case, like when our villain jams for slightly over the size of the pot, he's really representing a flush. Mm-hmm. You would think. So, I'd rather have I'd rather have ace 10 with a 10 of diamonds than ace queen without a diamond, for example.
Sure. I mean, yeah, any hand that I have that can, like ace queen or ace 10 with a diamond blocks like so much, like all his flushes basically.
But it's pretty interesting because like I don't know that those hands, but when you compare those hands to like the sets and 2 pairs, I'd probably rather have those hands than 2 pairs, but not more than a flush or not more than a set. Because like sets, like maybe he does this with like a low set. Or like top 2 or something.
Sure. If he somehow gets here with ace king.
Or king jack even. Like
yeah, I think king jack I think doing this with king jack is actually like, that's what I was thinking in game. I was like, this would be a very, very good play with king jack. Like
I don't know if I agree it would be a very
but I think it's good. Like because you really put like with king jack, like you put me in a blender, you put a lot of, like, yeah, you're going to get snapped sometimes by a flush, but you do put a lot of my hands like ace queen, for instance, in a tough spot. I don't know. Mm-hmm. You don't think this is a good play with king jack?
I don't know. I guess it's interesting. Like I'm thinking about it. I guess I think the most interesting part is you kind of get to depolarize, and like if you kind of then call with like a bunch of ace X with like a diamond, then you just get totally owned because the diamond is just not relevant.
Right, no, because like if I call with like ace X with a diamond and he shows king jack, like that's so sick.
Right, you're just gonna be like, wow, that's so brutal. So I don't know, and that so obviously yes, I think sets are good. Ace jack, ace king probably good, but also and then diamond. So like maybe we're far enough down in our range here where we can just kind of find a fold.
Yeah, I mean obviously we have some misses. I'm assuming we have some missed draws we end up here with like. Well, I guess 10-9, no diamond. No, never mind.
No. It's weird because a lot of our bluffs on the turn, I think, would contain the king of diamonds and then would, like, pair up. But that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, if we had, like... Yeah, like, if we had, like, king queen...
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like, king queen with the king of diamonds, I'd almost want to call with. Like, more, because it blocks king jack and it blocks flushes.
Yeah.
Like, and he really shouldn't be doing this with just a one-paired ace. Like, that would not make sense to me as a value donk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, you think this is a fold?
I think we can fold this. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to.
All right, well, I folded.
Okay, and he showed. It sounds like he must show. It sounds like he showed.
He didn't show, but he later claimed to have... You're not going to like this.
Okay, do you have a single paired ace?
He had pocket tens.
Well, I don't know.
No, you're not going to like it because he got me with the pocket tens bluff.
Well, the flush didn't get there in this case. Yeah. I mean, the flush did get there in this case. I think that was a key driver in our hand, was that the flush missed.
I know. I'm just...
Yeah, but I don't know that makes... I also think it makes less sense to turn pocket tens into a bluff when you... I don't know. When you have like
it seems like an insane call on the turn, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he probably had pocket tens with a diamond. Is what he was thinking, that he has the diamond and he's good sometimes. But I still actually don't think he's priced in, even if his diamonds are live.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it as a check jam on the turn. Seems fine.
Yep, that could be okay. I mean, it's okay. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really block that much.
Yeah. Well, but
it's a really creative bluff for sure. So kudos to your opponent either way for taking you to Value Town.
Yeah,
Ownage Town, really.
Ponage Town is what that was. But yeah, I got owned, so.
I don't hate the fold, though. I mean, I think that's kind of what happens when people jam on us. And I often kind of fall into this trap when I see villains that are like loose or aggressive, or even if I kind of just perceive them as capable of aggression, where I just think, well, I've made a pair, I just have to call, even if they're not laggy. Where really, if you're facing someone solid with good aggression, you kind of just have to go back to, well, I have to call with the top X% of my hands. Am I there? Well, I don't know. I think you probably have enough better hands to call with that block flushes and also beat bluffs.
Yeah. No, I do. I agree. That's what I thought in game too. I thought of all those hands we discussed. I was like, I can have all of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to be wrong. Also, that's just part of that's kind of the idea. Is in the long run, you will have so many of those hands that can call that. If villain is bluffing 10-10, villain may be over bluffing. Although I guess it's interesting because what other donk bluffs does villain have here?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good bluff. I don't really have a problem with it, but yeah. I do think it's a questionable turn call. But the river bluff is pretty sweet.
Right, I guess that's interesting. But again, if he kind of has 10-10 with a 10 of diamonds and he just thinks, well, maybe I'll just get a stack if a fourth diamond comes. Yeah. Although, really cool, really interesting hand. But I think well played from both players maybe in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I do like sizing smaller on the turn, but subtle stuff. So.
Yeah.
Cool. What do you got for us?
So we're back in Encore Boston Harbor. This is the same game as the last one. This is also another game where I wound up table changing, but trying to use that tool a little bit more as a classic facet of live poker is people good just the flow of the game where you have just an incredible table and then suddenly all the players that you want to play with leave and get replaced with like rocks or nits or something, and before you know it, your table that was like super awesome has suddenly become like, three chops in orbit.
Yeah.
Which so that kind of happened, and I wound up switching tables. And it's actually the same table, and this all happened in the span of just a couple hours. But wanted to throw that facet in there. Do take advantage of game selection where available to our listeners at live low stakes. Please do. Like if you're
listen, you heard it on Bankroll Burners, so it's good advice.
It's good advice. Yep. This might be the only advice that I'm confident is good. Is find good games.
Yeah. All right.
When I can keep it to single syllables and 3 words or less, then the advice is more likely to be good. Okay. Well, we are 400 effective in this hand. It's 1-3. The straddle is off in this case. The main villain is going to be a guy who I have a fair amount of history with. I've played with him a pretty solid amount. He's an older Asian fellow. He is quite loose, quite passive pre-flop, and does have quite a number of spazzes in his range post-flop, if you know the type of player I'm talking about. I'm sure many of you do. Great fun to play with, has a great attitude, lovely guy. Often wins quite a bit by bluffing a lot with hands that I would not expect to be in his range given the pre-flop action. Let's leave it at that and move on to the hand. As it folds to me in the hijack with Jack 9 of clubs, and I bump it up to 15.
Yep, seems fine. I mean, it's probably on the cusp of what you're opening here, but it seems fine.
Yeah, I think it's probably a pretty standard open. As you get moved down the gappers, we start wanting to fold hands like 9-7. Obviously, yeah. I say obviously like 4 vlogs ago I didn't open 9-7 from the hijack.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're probably fine to open this. You're right. It's a hijack, so whatever. Yeah, okay,
yeah, exactly. If there's limps, then it kind of throws the, if there's multiple limps, it throws the equation off. If someone opens, I'm obviously mucking this. But it actually just folds to me, so I get to open the hijack like it's a five-handed game. And like it's a three-handed game, the cutoff and the big blind both call.
Nice. So you're out of position to one guy.
Yep, and the cutoff, I don't think I had any really solid reads on. This may have even been the lag, actually, now that I think about it. This hand happened before the other one, but I think this may actually have been the lag who was just like calling a whole bunch before the flop.
Okay.
So the flop is going to come out pretty solid for us. It's going to come Jack of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, 5 of clubs. So Jack 10-5 with a diamond flush draw and a club. We've got top pair and backdoors galore.
Nice.
And the big blind is going to start this off by betting 20.
20 into 45.
Yep. So I think it's kind of interesting because obviously we think, donk often going to be like a one pair hand with a marginal kicker. Or a draw. There's obviously a lot of draws on this board. We are blocking some of them with our 9. But obviously we're fully unblocking diamonds in any sort of, king-queen type holding. So I think this is a pretty clear call for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's 100% a call. I think a raise here would be probably a little thin.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because if villain is doing this a lot with top pair marginal kicker, we have top pair marginaler kicker.
Yeah,
So we call, and
would you raise queen jack here?
I don't think so. I think I'd probably also be just calling.
But king jack you would raise.
King jack I'd probably raise.
Okay.
Obviously without a diamond, yeah. Okay. I would say with a diamond, I think I'm definitely just calling. If we have hand types that kind of weight us more towards blocking bluffs, then I'm probably more inclined to call.
Okay. And then I assume with ace jack this is just like a pure raise, something like that.
I think so. Yeah. Another thing that I've been trying to think about more, in terms of raising donks, and I think a lot of this was when we talked through a hand not too long ago, is really trying to think about future streets too. Like a hand like queen jack, like it can get tough to navigate future streets. It's tough to get like a lot of value, and if he does have a draw, like I'm okay kind of letting him blast off and like playing it a bit cautiously if he continues to show a ton of aggression when a bunch of draws complete. But a hand like ace jack, there's a little, we do beat like all of the value, so we can probably get value from like all his jack X. Those sort of situations. Whereas a hand like queen jack, we are behind a lot of jack X, and we are like in pretty tricky situations. There are a lot of boards we won't want to see.
Absolutely. Agreed completely. So, well summarized. All right, so we just call. Does the other villain get out of the way?
Yep. Cutoff folds, which is probably why I forgot what type of player he is. Or it's just because, this is Bankroll Burners. What do you expect? So we're off to the turn, which is a pretty interesting one. It comes the Queen of Hearts.
Okay.
So it brings an overcard. It's worth noting it doesn't really complete many draws. I mean, I guess it kind of does because King Queen is now a pair that like beats us, and I guess it does because 8-9, Queen 9, King Queen all get there in one way or another. But it is also a heart. It does not complete the front door diamond draw, and we do pick up a backdoor straight draw.
Sure. Yeah. How often is our backdoor straight draw good? If an 8 comes, it's probably good. If a king comes, probably not.
I think if a king comes, it's probably good a lot. Because I don't think our opponent has a ton of ace-x hands in his donking range. Like, yes, he does have, like, ace-x a diamond type hands. But, I don't necessarily think he has that. Like, I don't know. That's probably it, right? Like, he shouldn't have other random ace-x hands.
That's fair, yeah.
So it's probably good a fair amount. And, like, it could even be very good for us. Like, it's could go either way because villain can definitely have a good amount of king queen when he donks, and so if a king comes, we're like very
the straight versus 2 pair. So yeah. Okay, so what does he do?
So the villain now checks.
Villain checks.
So he went donk check, which I think could indicate some queen X, like that was a draw on the flop, and now he's like either pot controlling or like kind of doesn't know what to do with now like a pair plus a straight draw. Could also be like a diamond draw slowing down. or a Jack X slowing down when it sees an overcard.
Yeah, I think all of those are possible, and you would characterize that as something like a mid-heavy range. So usually versus mid-heavy range, we want to use large sizing, and I don't think our hand wants to bet large, so this sounds like a check.
Yeah, I think it does sound like a check. At the time, I was kind of thinking, villain, he checked. Well, I mean, I kind of think he's more weighted. He probably has, I want to charge diamonds and keep the betting lead and take the betting lead, so I'm going to bet.
Well, you're in position. You don't need the betting lead.
Well, that's true, but, I think that might at least entice him to check more on rivers.
I see what you're saying.
That's kind of what I mean. But buy a showdown, I guess, is the more accurate phrasing in this case.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we got a pair plus straight draw. I think we can just check back and try to get to showdown. But, in game, like I said, I think this player, I don't know. I just thought that he was, I was thinking he was probably drawing here.
I think if he checks river, we get to bet thinly for value.
Yeah.
If he goes check on turn and then he checks river, we get to bet thinly for value. But I do think betting here, and then with a plan to check river, is okay. If you think you're more likely to get your value on the turn than on the river, maybe. I don't know. It's against specifically diamonds, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of interesting. Because I think either way, if we definitely be bet folding turn, obviously.
Sure.
I think we probably have to. Even though this villain is, can be aggressive, is capable of aggression with bluffs, I still think, he is also the type of player who's going to be pretty heavily weighted towards value with raises. I think that is an important distinction where there are players who do know how to bluff and they have it in their range, but it's going to be a pretty limited percentage.
They're still not bluffing enough. Yeah.
And especially, by the way, there are also diamond draws that do beat us at this point, or have, like Queen X of diamonds. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't think I like a bet here. I just think it's thinner than a river bet in some senses, because the hands that he's going to check twice are worse than the hands that he checks once.
Yep.
So his river range is weaker. So I do think we get to bet small, because I think right now his range is rather mid heavy, but if he goes check and then he checks the river, his range becomes kind of bottom heavy, and so we do get to use those small sizing against the bottom, the ranges that just have a lot of junky stuff or weak hands that will call a small bet, even though they probably shouldn't, but will from a live player. But yeah, I see your point of charging diamonds. I still wouldn't bet here, but I understand why you did.
Yep. So I do choose a larger sizing given the dynamics of the board.
Oh, I don't like that.
Well, I mean, I think if we're gonna bet, we have to use a large sizing here.
Right, but what are you getting called by? But I guess but is it just diamonds? That's the only thing at this point that you're trying to get called by?
I guess probably. Seems
like it's too small of part of his range, though.
Yeah.
If you think about his range on the flop was diamond draws and Jack X and gutters. So you're now just isolating that.
I guess worse Jack X if he's got Jack 8 suited.
Call with the worst Jack X if you bet large here.
Yeah, it's possible. Well, anyway, I bet 60.
Okay, you seem unconvinced.
I think I am convinced. This probably should just be a check back, or if we're gonna bet, make kind of a small exploitative bet, because in the usual live player fashion, it's just good to extract value when we can, and we may not actually extract value from any hands we're beating with this big bet.
Yeah. Okay. So he calls. It sounds like
he does call. It would be a boring hand if he folded, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So we're at 200 in the pot.
200 in the pot, 300 behind, more or less. And the river is going to come the 8 of spades.
Bink.
Yes, and I think I make a pretty big mistake on this street, as villain now bets 160.
I thought you were going to say, I think I make a pretty big mistake by announcing all in before villain has a chance to act.
Nope. It's weird. I think I have never made a live mistake that bad.
Yeah. I've seen it.
Oh, absolutely. I saw a guy at this session turn over his hand while the player was left to act.
Amazing.
Which is just
good stuff.
So the villain bets 160, and I think I should just jam here. But it's like it's just such a, it's like a very like I guess what stopped me is like this is a really large sizing. And this I think is this by the way I think is the logic that I should have applied and that we did apply to the previous hand where I had pocket jacks where I was like, well, if I raise here, I'm going to not really like I don't know what am I get like the most likely hand I see him having when he bets here is a 9, which is never folding anyway. He could have slow played ace king or king 9. Like, it is not, and, yes, he is probably the exact type of player who is calling ace-king a fair amount. Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting spot, but I think given we have so little behind, I should just close my eyes and jam.
So, just for the listeners, by the way, just to review here, the board, so hero...
I can walk through the board because I have it up. It's I've got Jack 9 of clubs. The board came out Jack of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, 5 of clubs. He donked small. I called. The other player who was in the hand folded. The turn Queen of hearts. He checks. I bet large incorrectly as we've deduced, and he calls again. The turn now comes the 8 of spades. The flush draw bricks out. We make the straight, and the villain now donks 160 into 205, leaving himself, or rather leaving me basically with 150 behind as I'm the effective stack. So it was a really interesting spot because I was kind of thinking, well, it just seems like he probably has either missed diamonds or like a 9 or like a better straight, so I should probably just call here.
I mean, I think that's sound logic. Why are you saying you should raise?
I don't know. I think it's one of these things. I mean, it is kind of. I'll steal from Crush Live Poker briefly here. This sort of like, I don't remember the exact term. It's like reverse pot odds, I think, is the...
that he's going to be forced to call because he's going to be getting an insane price when you jam.
Right, like if he is betting like a 2 pair or set hand, not that there really are many set hands, so let's say 2 pair or even like, I don't know, ace queen or king queen or something, that he's just spaz betting here and doesn't realize what the stack size is, and I raise, he's just getting, like, he's like, wow, it's 140 more. Are there enough of the... Basically, the thought is, are there enough of those hands that I should just be closing my eyes and raising, and, if he has ace-king or king-9 that he, like, slow-played, then so be it.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem odd that he would slow-play those hands on the turn. But right. We do have to remember that check call donk is a nutted line from live players.
Right, and if I kind of thought that a large part of his range was flush draws, that are unpaired, then obviously we're not going to get any value from jamming, even for only a bit more.
Right, he has to be overplaying something.
Right, like king queen is probably the most likely hand, like that type of hand.
Why? Just like top pair?
Yeah, well, I think king queen just kind of also makes sense when I'm thinking back to the flop, donk flop with an open ender, pick up top pair, good kicker on the turn, and so decide to check because now you have showdown value, check call, and then I don't know why you would possibly donk river with that hand.
Why would he donk? I mean, it could be a spaz, but like the best thing to do against spaz is his call.
Okay, so you think calling's okay? Because I was kind of thinking about this after, and I was like, well, I feel like I should have just put it in and like tried to just get him to side call with like. If he has some weird two, and maybe he's got like 2 pair.
Queen 8 suited.
I mean, what about Queen Jack? Suited. Maybe he slow plays Queen Jack because he's like scared of, because he's like, oh, this guy just hit his ace king. They always put you on ace king,
Yeah, like I guess if he has 2 pair here, that's like Queen 8, something like that, or Jack 8, where he just rivered his like 2 pair. But I do think that's still a very small part of his range compared to the nuttish hands.
Right.
I don't know. My experience versus this line against live players being very nutted, I think I just call here. Even though I understand the idea of raising, but I just think against most live players, this is just something like if you told me you folded here, I wouldn't even I would say that I don't agree with that play, but I wouldn't think it was crazy because this line is so freaking nutted when live players do it. They just always have it.
Yeah.
They always have something insane. So I think I just call, man.
Okay. Well, I do call, and I basically snap call because I had basically decided when I saw this card, like, and then I see him cutting out chips, So I do call, and he taps the table and gives me a nice hand and flashes me the king of diamonds as he mucks.
All right. So there you go. Yeah, you didn't need to raise. You're getting no money for that raise. So yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of interesting where it's a similar situation to last hand, but I almost feel like, this hand is definitely a better spot at least than the last hand to raise. Just given that we'd be setting him such a crazy price, and we have a much stronger hand, and we actually can get called by some worse.
Yeah, I think I understand that logic. I just, like I said, this line, check call donk river big is like.
Yeah, it's just weird because I think donking flop does kind of play into it where, there weren't really any, his donking range on the flop, even though he goes check call donk thereafter, it's tough for him to have because he donked small on the flop, I felt like that. I kind of feel like that caps his range in a weird way.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, but I think you did. I think you played that street well. I think you should just.
That's high praise.
Yeah, that's really high praise here in Bankroll Burners. You did one street well.
Yes. Maybe even pre-flop.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on. Are we going back to the online home game for this one?
No. So, just once again, this is just an incredible hand by me. Just truly some bankroll burners, some bankroll burning. So, this is actually a 2-2 game at Best Bet Jacksonville. So I decided to go play. I decided because I've been hemorrhaging money so much at 2-5, I need to play some 2-2. Chill out a little bit. But I didn't want to play at Orange Park because the cap is $200, which is ridiculous. It's like not a game. So I went to Best Bet Jacksonville where the cap is $300, which I think is fine. You get to pay 150 big blinds.
I will say the one time I played 2-2 at Best Bet Orange Park, I did win some ridiculous amount of money in some ridiculously short amount of time. Because the players at Best Bet Orange Park, especially in the 2-2 game, I will say, are not necessarily thinking critically about poker.
That may be true.
Even though you might see it as not a real game, I think there is opportunity for a pretty redonkulous win rate.
Absolutely. It's just a very high variance sort of world because you're so short. But yeah, absolutely. So, I will say that I played, I think, some of the worst poker I've played in the past year during this session. So I'll put that
it's always fun when you're on a downswing because, the downswing makes you play worse and then you get on a worse downswing.
Exactly. So this was great.
Enough prefacing and on to the burning.
So we are 7-handed. It is 2 a.m. It is a not insane game, but it's a good game. And we are sitting with $775 in our stack. So we are nearly 400 big blinds deep.
Wow.
Which is deeper than I may have from a big blind standpoint, might be one of the deepest I've ever been. I really am not an experienced deep stack player, and I think that plays into the absolute stupidity of my play in this hand.
Yeah, well, in the online home games, you've probably played deeper, I would guess.
Yeah, but that's true. I have, but live poker is different than online poker. So.
Okay, so we're playing quite deep. So you've had quite a winning session up to this point, at least.
Yes, it's been a good session so far.
Let's change it. Talk me through some action.
Yeah. So I'm not used to playing this deep live. All right, so we go low jack limp, high jack limp.
Great.
I am in the small blind. I make it $15. And
with what?
With king. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes. King of clubs, 10 of hearts. And we make it 15. And the big blind calls, and the limpers call.
I hate it. I don't hate your play. I hate what has happened.
Yeah, not fun.
And honestly, it is kind of interesting because this is a pretty weak hand. Over 2 limpers, out of position to all. You can probably over limp this sometimes and even fold this sometimes from the small blind.
I will say that these particular villains who had limped were limp folding a decent amount. So okay. I actually felt okay about possibly just picking up the blinds here. The big blind in this hand was calling with everything. So I thought there was a chance he might just call and then maybe I play with him, which would be fine.
Is the big blind the super deep one?
No, the main villain is the low jack.
Okay, so then I don't mind it.
Go 600 or 700 deep with, but he's not very relevant in this hand. So.
Well, I'm just kind of thinking, from an opening perspective, if you think the low jack and the high jack are going to fold a lot and the big blind's going to call, we would prefer it if we weren't playing super deep, a 300 big blind stack depth with kind of a marginal hand out of position.
That's true. Yeah.
That's the only thing I'm thinking. If the big blind is fairly shallow, King 10 obviously plays pretty well shallow because we can just make top pair good kicker and stack off a lot. But position does start to matter a lot more, I've been told, at deeper stacks. So
yeah, it's possible. Like, again, you're right. Maybe this is just an overlimp.
Yeah,
or check actually would be.
Check. That's even better. We don't even need to put money in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm probably happy checking King 10 off over 2. And over 1 limper, definitely opening, but also, obviously the more limpers, the more we should tighten up.
Yeah, so you're probably right. Maybe this is already a punt.
Call me a nit in the comments. I dare you.
Nit. But I do make it 15. I don't think it can be that bad.
Nope, I agree. I would say we probably do. We are unlikely to have the best hand at this point, though, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, you mean have the most equity. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think someone probably has ace high or a pocket pair.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go off to a flop.
The flop is pretty interesting. It's Jack of Hearts, 9 of clubs, 6 of clubs. So we flop 1 over, a gut shot, and a backdoor second nut flush draw.
Okay.
I go ahead and check. I'm pretty much always checking, I think. Probably. Always checking. Yep. I think so. In the hijack,
we could probably bet a small segment of hands like sets and like combo draws.
Yeah, I might. I also might simplify and just check range.
Yep, and then we can check raise those hands into 4 players. So I'm happy to check.
Yep. I check with actually, by the way, the intention of check raising this particular hand. I think it's got a lot of nice qualities to it.
Yeah, it definitely has equity. We'd have to make sure that we have enough value combos that we're check raising because, we're obviously going to check raise. I think we probably want to check raise a lot of flush draws. We want to check raise a lot of like open enders because there are a ton of open enders we can have here.
I'm probably not check raising any open enders here, actually.
Okay. Even with like one, if we have like queen 10 with a club?
I tend to personally like on flush draw boards, I don't check raise a ton of open enders. I said none. You're right. I'm check raising some, but I definitely check raise less open enders on flush draw boards. I also am not going to check raise every flush draw. I'm mostly going to check raise one. Like I would definitely check raise all the like wheel ace flush draws here. Yep. I'm probably going to check raise. So obviously 7-8 of clubs I'm check raising.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of other flush draws. I guess like my double Broadway flush draws, I will probably check raise sometimes and check call other times. I probably mix it. So I think I have a decent amount of like mixing it up with different bluffs here. In terms of value, obviously I have all my sets. I have probably some Jack 9 suited, although not a lot. I probably would check raise aces here. Mm-hmm. Probably kings too.
Yep.
I don't know. So
maybe even queens. Yeah.
Reasonable check raise?
Yeah. Well, I'm just basically, this is something that I've been trying to do is because I feel like I have been over bluffing in certain spots where, especially with like kind of live reads or just thinking, oh, this hand has nice properties, I should check raise it. And then, upon thinking about the other hands I want to check raise, I'm like, if I'm check raising like all the way down here, maybe I'm, I either need to cut down on check raising some of those other combos or I need to find more value check raises, or I need to not check raise this hand, basically.
Yeah, I think that's actually fair. I feel like I'm working really hard to find more check raises. Maybe this is a spot where I took that overboard. I could see merit for saying this isn't a great check raise candidate.
Well, if we're check raising hands like, ace jack and king jack a lot, then by all means, I think we should throw this hand in the check raising mix.
Definitely not king jack. I don't know if I check raise ace jack. Probably not, but.
Yeah, and if we don't have enough thin value check raises, then we definitely need to cut down on like our like some bluff check raises. And of course, it's also okay multi-way, and I'm a big advocate for multi-way, especially live when it's and especially when it's like 4 ways. We can play like our hand a little bit more, like play to our hand a little bit more and play a little bit more straightforward because like we just don't really want to put ourselves in spots with like super crappy equity against a guy who just bet into 3 players.
Fair enough. All good points. So I check. Mm-hmm. The big blind checks. The low jack checks. And the hijack, who I would say is fairly tight, not a nit by any means, but fairly tight, makes it 50.
Quite large.
Mm-hmm. And I go with the plan. I make it 150.
Okay.
I don't know. I think there's certainly stuff to be said that just don't do this, but I'm trying to find more check raises. I don't feel terrible about this unless you think it's particularly punty, but I don't know. What do you think?
No, I mean I think it's okay as long as we have, you know, again, like but the thing is, like, if you're saying find more check raises, then I think we do need to check raise some like Jack X also. Because like we cannot just find more bluff check raises.
That's true. Yeah, and you're maybe right. Like I said, I don't know that I'm check raising ace jack, but maybe I should be.
Right. If we're looking for more check raises and we're trying, you know, and we're just trying to play more aggressive in general, and we want to mix it up with a bunch of different bluffing candidates, which of course I think is fantastic because, you know, you can't just check raise with flush draws and sets because then you're just like very easy to play against. But so I would probably say yes, we can check raise this hand, but let's just make sure we also add in the appropriate number of value check raises as we add in bluff check raises.
Fair enough. Okay, well, yeah, I feel fine here. I feel like my check raising range is okay at the very least.
Yeah, and I would also say 50 is big. It's a 3 players. But I would also say we are very likely to get a heads up because it is a nice dynamic that we were out of position as the raiser. So because all the opponents are in position to us, the big blind and the low jack can bet in flow here. Mm-hmm. And they have chosen not to, which means that their hands are likely not going to call our raise.
Yeah, that is what happens here. They do fold, and the villain in the hijack makes a pretty quick call.
Okay.
Actually, like a snap call. He just doesn't think about it. So, the turn is a pretty interesting one. It's the King of Hearts.
Okay, well that's nice. We make top pair.
You make top pair. What do you like here? Do you want to bet or do you want to check? And if you're going to bet, what are you going to bet?
Well, let's see. I think I like betting here. And I think I like bet folding. I think I like bet folding a lot here.
Okay.
Because I think, you know, we block. I mean, I just think, like, if this is like a live player, this is like, you know, we don't have super thick value. I do want to try and extract some value. You know, we make top pair. We can charge all his jacks. I do think his bet call range on the flop is going to have a lot of Jack X in it. He's pretty unlikely to have King Jack because we block a lot of King Jack. And the king coming on the board also obviously blocks a lot of King Jack. So I think I like betting here. I think I like betting on the smaller side. I don't know what the smaller side is.
Yeah, I mean, the pot is 360. Right?
Yeah, and there's about a little over 600 left. So maybe we bet like half pot. Maybe a little smaller.
Yeah, like a third pot.
But it's also interesting because there's 2 flush draws, and maybe we should be betting big in general on these boards. But we're also out of position.
I thought it was sort of like this was a kind of board texture where like a large bet is probably in order.
Yeah, it does. And does our hand want to bet very large? It's interesting because we have both a club and a heart. So, you know, we can't get called by a worse like King X of clubs. And we can't get called by any like sort of 10X of hearts combo draw. Or like pair and a flush draw or something. So is it kind of a weird spot where we are blocking maybe some of the hands that we beat that would call us if we made a large bet?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, like, what are we hoping he has here? I mean, like, it's certainly a jack, like Jack X.
Queen
right?
Jack, Jack 10, I think, are what we're really hoping he has. In which case, and if we think that's the type of hand he has, then those hands probably aren't going to... I mean, maybe that hand probably does call a large bet here.
Against those hands, you want to use a large sizing. Those are definitely like marginal made hands that you want to put in a tough spot.
The other thing that we have to consider when we're talking large sizings is the stack size. SPR is like only 1.5-ish, 1 2/3.
Yeah, so, I certainly wouldn't use like an overbet sizing.
Yeah, but like if we bet like, I mean, I don't know, like if we bet like 3/4, I feel like the stack sizes are going to get a little wonky. On, you know, if we bet like 250 here, which is even a little less than 3/4, then it's gonna be like 860 in the pot with like 350 behind, which is just, you know, I mean, it does kind of commit us to our hand.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily know that I want to be committed to this hand at this juncture.
And at these stack depths too.
Yeah.
It's like you really want to stack off with like top pair here. I mean, there's also of course like the draws that we can get called by. There are like mostly club draws, but there aren't a ton of open enders because we are blocking some of those. Obviously, I mean we are also there's like 10-8, right, which we're blocking,
and there's 7-8.
Queen 10 is of course the nuttos.
And maybe with the other interesting thing about these stack sizes is, I mean, the reason we'd want to use a large bet, right, is to make the max from a jack where we go like bet 250 and then jam and just give him such a good price on the river that like he kind of has to call with a jack, or he decides to call with a jack. You know, and maybe his jack X is doing that enough. So it's
but I mean, do we want to try to do that at these depths? Like, I don't know. Do we want to go out for 400 big blinds with like top pair of mediocre kickers?
Well, I wonder if we can check here again. Like, I'm kind of thinking about checking here and like evaluating, because like, you know, yes, he's gonna check back a lot of jack X, but like as we kind of said, we might not stack off. Like, we might not be able to get those hands to stack off for 400 big blinds. And like if he checks back and the river comes a brick, we can definitely be betting. Or if the river comes a heart, we can probably be betting.
Yeah, we can probably bet and bet large too.
Right, on a lot of rivers. And then we definitely get called by a jack for a large sizing.
Yeah.
If he bets the turn, we get put in a disgusting... Like, we just get put in a pretty gross spot with our top pair marginal kicker on a card that should be advantageous for us.
If what happens?
If we check and he bets the turn, like, and he bets the turn large, then, like, we feel pretty gross.
We have to call and then probably fold river or something like that. Anyway, we bet 200.
Okay.
Which I don't like.
I think our hand, I think it's probably too thin.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's too thin. I don't like this bet at all from me. And he goes ahead and puts in the rest of his stack.
Ugh.
Yeah. Really, really nasty stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here like, well, crap. You know, I am blocking the nuts. And I am blocking the top. I'm blocking top two. So, like, this could be a set. This could be a flush draw. I don't think our king of clubs is very relevant against this being a flush draw. I think this is basically, in my head, and the game is one thing, is like this is either a set or a flush draw, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a heart flush draw also, which we're blocking. Like, I do think he can have some, like, open-enders or gutters, or, I mean, even, I don't know if he's playing 9-6 of hearts, I guess he limp called.
He probably is.
It's possible. So, he can have straight draws and two pairs that picked up the heart flush draw also, and we are blocking some of those. Like Queen 10 of hearts, for example. Not Queen 10. Queen 10's now a straight, but 8 has 10-8 of hearts, 10-7 of hearts, stuff like that.
And we want him to have those, and we can't.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, and then what price are we getting? I mean, it looks like we'd have to call 400 to win 760.
We have to call. So we were at like 610 on the turn. We have to call 400 to win.
To win 1160, I should say.
Yeah, so we're getting a little better than 2 to 1.
Yeah.
Or no, sorry, we're getting almost 3 to 1.
We're getting almost 3 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like, what do I want to have here? I guess like, what do I want to call? Obviously, like I would call pocket kings here, easy call.
I mean, I think this is also a spot where we do Queen 10. I mean, I guess if you're not check raising open enders, then that does.
I will have some things. Queen 10. I'm not never check raising.
Yeah,
I have some.
Queen 10, pocket kings, pocket jacks, pocket nines. Are good calls. King Jack probably as a call.
I don't know that that's better than our hand.
I think it is because it can't block because of the texture of the board. If we have King Jack, then we're not really blocking. Then we can't really block any draws, and we do block value. But I think Queen 10 is much more likely if we don't have a 10. Like I think like King 10 is better because it blocks Queen 10. Right. Because I actually think Queen 10 is a decent part of his range here that would play this way. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So
But
I actually like
also I think he has
having it.
probably all the combos of Queen 10. So we're not. I mean, we are blocking 4 of them, but there are still 12 left,
Yeah.
which is like a lot. That's a lot of combos of Queen 10, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, which is why I think like, yeah, I don't know, it's rough.
I also think at the end of the day, I mean, if this is like a relatively tight, like live player, we can like exploitatively overfold this quite a bit because like how often is he going to show up with like a flush draw? Sometimes.
Well, I will say one thing. He kept saying you got to pay to draw to your club. He kept saying that, which really made me feel like he had a club draw.
And the other thing is, you know, I totally agree with you that the king of clubs is not super relevant to here. But the other thing is also, like, when we think about the equities, like, ace x of clubs also has, like, pretty good, like, that also, like, adds outs to his thing
Sure.
where, like, you know, that is relevant. And I haven't done, you know, I assume you haven't necessarily done this in Equilab or something similar. But if you have, that is something to consider where our equity against his range does go down some amount because he definitely can have a whole lot of ace x of clubs as part of his flush draws.
It's true. I mean, like if you think like if he has combo draws or just like ace x of clubs, like, you know, maybe we're like 1/3 equity against those hands, and then if he has the rest of it is like sets and then queen 10.
Right, like if we're either drawing dead or he has, you know, minimum,
You know, call it a third equity, something like that.
yeah.
It can't be that good to call, I guess.
Right, that's the kind of the interesting part that I'm thinking of. It's, you know, but I mean, we do block a club, so that does obviously reduce his equity with club draws, which is nice. So, but I don't know. I think I probably just fold here if it's like an old,
Not old, dude.
if it's like a tight ABC guy, like who kind of doesn't know what they're doing. I'm probably just gonna like fold here for this amount and at this depth. I don't really want to stack off with this hand.
Yeah, just live to see another day.
And if we're if we're potting it, like, or if we're betting fairly large on on this turn, then I don't know. This is probably one of our weaker hands that we're doing it with. But the 10 is nice. I will agree. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think I do have sets to call here with, obviously. Like,
oh, King Queen is better than King 10 because it blocks Queen 10 and it unblocks 10 8.
Yeah. You're right. King Queen. Yeah. I just have better hands. I think this is a really terrible call. So obviously I called.
Okay, and I hope he has nothing.
He has Queen 10.
Ah.
Yeah. Offsuit, of course.
Yeah, well, naturally.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we
he
do not
jams,
win.
we call, and he has Queen 10.
So massive punt.
So yeah, I mean it's I just think we can psi fold the turn. I like to get curious too and think, well, what does he even have here? But it's like at the end of the day, even if we block value, he just has so much. It's annoying.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of value out there as played. So I think it's just terrible. I also think this betting the turn was bad, calling off was bad, just probably raising pre-flop was bad. Just a horribly played hand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think raising pre-flop can be that bad, and I don't think check raising flop can be that bad either. Especially, I mean, assuming that you're actually, you know, that and I've been trying to be better about like doing actual randomizing with hands that I like think about raising, because like, you know, I think if you're raising King 10 sometimes and like a bunch of other bluffs sometimes, totally fine. You know, if we're always raising King 10 off on the flop, maybe, you know, or King 10 with the King of Clubs, I don't know that we want to be check raising that 100% of the time, especially if we're trying to fold in open enders and other stuff. So
yeah, fair point, Sal.
So it's interesting. I don't think that you necessarily played the hand badly prior to the turn, but I do think we probably have to fold.
Yeah. Well, everyone, you've wasted another hour and 15 minutes of your precious life listening to us talk about terrible, terrible poker plays.
Yeah, I'll be honest
Really
with you, folks.
appreciate
This is a bad one. If you've made it through this hour and 15, like, go hug a loved one.
Yeah, be like, my God, how can these two people spend so much time thinking about and playing poker and be so terrible? Like, is there any hope for you, really, if you think about it?
And please let us know in the comments what your worst punt you've made recently is, because I doubt it's worse than ours.
Probably is not, so. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks. Have a
Good
good
day.
night.